Okay, we're going to get started here. Sorry for a brief delay, but there's a lot of folks in here in the not only in the council chambers, but also out in the lobby, and we want to get everybody a chance to be here. So if there are any police officers up top that have taken seats, I doubt if you did, please, if you would, give those to the folks that we protect and serve. And I know we did that already in the front. We actually had about 60 of our officers and employees in this room, and they are now in the back watching this through video. So, and we'll be bringing them out momentarily. So, welcome to our Major Commendation Awards ceremony. I wanted to start off by introducing, which is fitting, our one of our chaplains, Chaplain Kevin Llanos, and he'll do the invocation. So if you would please stand and then remain standing after the invocation, we'll do our Pledge of Allegiance. So, Kevin.
Thank you, Chief. Excuse me, sir. If you wouldn't mind bowing your heads with me, please. Almighty God, we thank you so much for this day and this opportunity to celebrate with these individuals who are being honored today for their service to this community. We give thanks for your protection over them, and we pray that you would continue to protect and bless them and every public servant of this city. Help us to continue to have hearts that are willing to serve, and ultimately let us bring glory to your name. We thank you, we praise you, and we pray all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Please join us with for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm a little bit concerned because I only see one person here from the media, right? And that a little bit concerning. I am hoping we got the message out to all of the media, or they're not tied up on a fire somewhere. So hopefully they will be showing up shortly. This time I'd like to introduce some of our dignitaries, and if you would please stand, and we'll hold our applause, and then we'll recognize all of you at once. But I wanted to start out with our mayor, Mayor Lee Brand. Please stand. Also, next to our mayor is our newly appointed city manager, Wilma Kwan Schechter. Also, we have council member Steve Brandow. Steve, he was waiting for me to try to embarrass him, but I need a vote on this next item I'm going forward with. And also from the United States Attorney General's office, he is the attorney for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District, and that's Phil Talbert. Please stand, Phil. And also from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Kirk Sheriff, he is Assistant U.S. Attorney, and he is housed here in Fresno. So thank you all for coming. I don't know if there's any other dignitaries. If there are, please raise your hand. You won't do that. So anyway, give him a round of applause. I'd also just going to introduce members of my staff that are here today, and just ask that you would stand. Again, hold your applause for each and every one of them. I'll begin with Deputy Chief Lydia Carrasco, Deputy Chief Pat Farmer, Deputy Chief Robert Navarez, Captain Anthony Martinez. We also have Lieutenant Rob Beckwith. Over in the corner, they're already standing, beginning to the left here, Captain Burke Farah, Captain Mike Reed, Captain Phil Cooley, Captain Don Gross, and I know we have some other folks that are going to be recognized today that are out there in another room. So thank you. Give them a round of applause. This time, I'd like to have our mayor, Mayor Lee Brand, please come forward and say a few words. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to keep my remarks brief. That's an applause. No, it's an honor to attend this event. I'm going to attend as many as I can, always to show my support for the PD And I've read the stories that are being told today and being honored. And I'm always never amazed at the sacrifice and brave people, the men and women of the Fresno PD. And Fresno, we're having major challenges right now with gangs and crime. And a lot of it comes from Sacramento, from misguided propositions, Prop 57, Prop 47, prison realignment, and we're all seeing the consequences of that right now. And we're seeing an increase in our homeless population, and vagrancy is a direct result, and it's taxing our resources. So we're promising the police and the citizens of Fresno that I'm going to, take this focus very strong. I'm on the, it's called the Big 11, the top 11 mayors of the state of California. I'm trying to get my colleagues, other mayors, to join me to start to go to Sacramento and get some changes, because they're killing everybody. It's across the state. It's not just confined to the city of Fresno. And public safety will always be my top priority. It was during the campaign. Will be as long as I'm here as your mayor. And my goal is to get you the resources you need, financial and otherwise, personnel, equipment, to get you guys where you need to be successful in the city of Fresno. And to do that, I've got a bold economic plan to create 10,000 jobs. And what this does over time, it expands our tax base to give us the money to pay for what we need to do to make sure people are fairly compensated, we have the right numbers and the right equipment to get the job done. So again, it's always an honor to come to these events, and God bless you, and God bless the Fresno Police Department.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate you being here today, as always, and for your support. And I also know that Councilmember Oliver Bain snuck in somewhere. Oliver, where are you at? Right over here. Thank you for your support, former Fresno police officer. So I want to make just a few comments, because we do have a long ceremony today, but I want to start out by saying thank you to all of you, family, friends, of members that are going to be recognized today. This is our opportunity as a police department to be able to recognize those ordinary officers and employees in the Fresno Police Department that have done some extraordinary things. They have rose above what is normally expected of them, gone above and beyond in the course of their performance of their duties, and they have done some heroic things, and we're going to recognize those individuals today. And I'm talking about officers that are applying CPR or chest compressions to an individual to save their life who's been stabbed. Officers that have made a dynamic entry into a motel room as a suspect is stabbing a female multiple times, ultimately saving her life as a result of their actions. I'm talking about individuals who were rescuing someone who was drowned, and even individuals that have tried to take their own life, and our police officers come in contact with them and rescue them. These are truly heroic people. Not all of them will be life-saving efforts. We also are going to recognize individuals that have recovered a certain amount of firearms in our city, taking those firearms off the street. We're going to recognize a couple of police cadets that have lifted latent prints and led to a significant number of arrests of individuals in our community. We're going to recognize a group of detectives and officers for what they did in 2 long-term gang operations, one of them called Operation Slide Lock, the other one Operation Dog Track. And you're going to hear a brief summary of what those investigations were about. But in essence, taking the significant leadership of those 2 gangs off of our streets, removing them from society, having them prosecuted by Kim Sanchez in the U.S. Attorney's Office so that they can no longer be involved in human trafficking, taking young 14, 15, 16-year-old girls away from their families, placing them on the streets across the United States, and forcing them into the sex trade. We're going to talk about the Strother Gang on Operation Slide Lock, the arresting of 28 of those individuals in leadership roles that had trafficked firearms not only here locally but across California and western United States, and how that leadership of that gang has been done away with. And so we have a lot of recognition to be done today. A lot of people that are going to be coming forward. In total, we're going to be recognizing over 60 of our employees today. We will condense the write-ups and the summaries of each of these individuals, but we want to make sure that each of you have an opportunity to hear those stories. Some of the people cannot be here for obvious reasons. They're out of town on vacation, at work, but for whatever reason, we still want to read some of the things that they have done. So let me just say this. Police officers have a very, very dangerous job. What other profession can an individual go to work, do everything that they know to be right in a course of their shift, and in that split second, make a decision that ultimately could cause them to be arrested and lose their freedom, even though they felt they made the right decision? Worse yet, what other profession can an individual go to work, do everything they know to be right during the course of their shift, and fail to make that right split-second decision and not come home from work at all? That is the life of a police officer. Being away from their families during holidays and weekends, working nights, being called out in the middle of the night for a homicide investigation or a SWAT call, having their vacations and days off interrupted so they can go to court and testify against a violent criminal, and the families that are at home left behind to worry. We have a saying in the Fresno Police Department that although it is the officer who wears the badge, it is the family that carries the weight of that badge. They are the ones left behind to worry whether or not their loved one will even come home after their shift. So I want to say a special thank you to all of you that are here today for the sacrifices that you make in allowing your loved one to serve this community and to keep our citizens safe. So with that, we are going to start our ceremony. We have Sergeant Ignacio Reese, who has this incredibly deep, dark, berry white voice that is going to read the summaries. And you may have to read a little faster today because we have a lot more to do, Ignacio. But as they do, we're going to have our people being recognized. They're going to come forward. They're going to have medals presented. I'll have Mayor Brand and our city manager step forward along with Deputy Chief Carrasco. And I don't know if we're going to switch it off, but we may at some point in time if you get tired. All righty. With that, we'll get the ceremony beginning. God bless you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Dyer. We begin today's ceremony by awarding the latent print and suspect identification pin. Will Cadets Kathleen Christensen and Carlos Garcia please come forward? Just as the major commendations recognize heroic efforts and exceptional performance, the Latent Print Award recognizes our members for their hard work in lifting essential latent print evidence at crime scenes, which result in the identification of suspects. To qualify for this award, Cadet Christensen and Cadet Garcia each lifted 6 prints within a 12-month period that resulted in the identification of suspects. These numbers are significant because the more latent prints we collect at crime scenes, the more suspects we will identify, arrest, and prosecute. Historically, every arrest from a latent print hit results in another 3 to 4 cases solved and additional suspects identified and apprehended. For their success in this effort, please recognize Cadet Kathleen Christensen and Cadet Carlos Garcia, who are receiving the department's Bronze Latent Print Award pin. We would now like to award the Fresno Police Department Recovered Firearms Award pins. Will Officer Michael Pierce and Officer Benito Soto please come forward? The Recovered Firearms Award was created 6 years ago in an effort to curb the upward trend in gang members and other criminals illegally possessing firearms. Numerous firearms have been taken from the hands of these criminals, and without the continued efforts of all personnel to disarm these individuals, the citizens of Fresno would experience many more incidents of gun violence. We may never know the number of homicides that were prevented, including that of officers, without the proactive efforts of officers to keep our streets safe. The following officers are being recognized for recovering 10 or more guns within a 1-year period. Special Response Team Officer Michael Pierce and Street Violence Detective Benito Soto. Please recognize these officers for their hard work in removing illegal guns from the streets of Fresno. We would now like to award the Outstanding Achievement Award Medal. The Outstanding Achievement Award is given to members for exceptional performance or career achievement in an assignment, which is clearly above that which is normally expected and which has contributed materially to the success of a unit, project, or operation. Will Sergeant Rich Escalante, Sergeant Walter Boston, Sergeant Leslie Bragg, and Detective Eden Serta please come forward. Detective Michelle Ochoa is also receiving this award, but unfortunately could not be here today. On November 3rd, 2016, more than 400 local, state, and federal agents came together with the Fresno Police Department with the common goal of the success of Operation Slide Lock. The investigation is the largest of its kind ever investigated by the Fresno Police Department and focused on taking down and dismantling of the Strother Boys criminal street gang. This gang has been known to the Fresno Police Department since the late 1980s, and their predominant source of income has been the sales of narcotics, sales of illegal firearms, and human trafficking. These sergeants and detectives collaborated with the California Department of Justice, special agents from the FBI and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, California Highway Patrol, Special Operations Unit, California Department of Corrections, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the Fresno County District Attorney's Office to end the criminal career of this extremely dangerous gang. Many of the suspects' cases have been adopted by Assistant U.S. Attorney Kim Sanchez for federal prosecution, meaning harsher and longer prison terms. Would Assistant U.S. Attorney Kim Sanchez please come forward?
I wanted to say a few words about Kim. Without a doubt, the most dedicated, steadfast prosecuting attorney that I have ever worked with. She works these cases around the clock, 7 days a week. She knows every single one of these individual gang members. She knows their history. She knows everything about them. And she is one of those people that truly is over the operation. There may be a captain involved or a lieutenant, but the reality is Kim is the one in charge of the investigation and determines who's arrestable, for what charges, and a number of other things. And Kim, I cannot say enough good things about you. You are somebody that I deeply respect and admire, and I know all of our officers and detectives too. So thank you for your commitment to keeping our community safe. Thank you.
For their incredible commitment to this year-long investigation, their 16 to 20 hours per day, 7 days per week, and successful takedown of this criminal street gang, we are very proud to present the Outstanding Achievement Medals to Sergeant Rich Escalante, Sergeant Walter Boston, Sergeant Leslie Bragg, Detective Eden Serta, and United States District Attorney Kim Sanchez.
Round of applause.
Will Deputy Chief Andy Hall and Lieutenant Richard Tucker please come forward? On May 16th of 2016, Deputy Chief, then Captain Andy Hall, and Lieutenant Richard Tucker received word that presidential candidate Donald Trump would be staging a rally at Salon Arena on May 27th. As commanders of the department's mobile field force, Deputy Chief Hall and Lieutenant Tucker began to properly prepare for this potentially volatile event. Through closely monitoring similar events throughout the country and meeting with the Trump advance team, the Secret Service, and with other allied agencies, they learned what to expect and planned accordingly. On the day of the event, it was clear that department personnel were well prepared. Deputy Chief Hall and Lieutenant Tucker attended the briefings and made certain that every officer assigned to this detail understood their precise role. They also established a vital, balanced tone for personnel. As expected, there were several outbursts, and these were handled very professionally by our personnel. There were also incidents where officers became the focus of protester emotion. However, because of the proper preparation, our officers handled these with minimal force, extreme professionalism, and restraint. For their preparation, commitment, and successful response to this operation, we proudly present Deputy Chief Andy Hall and Lieutenant Richard Tucker with the Fresno Police Department Outstanding Achievement Medal.
These are both two very, very humble individuals. In fact, Deputy Chief Hall begged me not to present him with the medal today. And I said, last time I checked, you had 2 stars, I have 4, so we're going to have the ceremony. But there's so much that is unsaid about the preparation for the Trump rally that could have ended up like many other cities across America. Going out in advance and removing the rocks, having the trees trimmed, making sure we had folks up in the high places, escape routes, equipment, our special response team, folks standing by, just so many things that went into this. And we received a lot of positive recognition across the nation for the efforts here in Fresno, and it's because of others, but largely because of Deputy Chief Hall and Lieutenant Rick Tucker. So thank you guys both. A round of applause, please.
Will Captain Mark Salazar, Lieutenant David Ramsey, Sergeant Andre Benson, and Detective Ken Dodd please come forward? Detective Jose Rivera and Detective Conrado Martin are unable to be here today for this honor. The Dog Pound Gang claimed over 200 members and was the most violent gang in Fresno history. The gang was involved in murder, assault, drug and weapons trafficking, human trafficking, credit card fraud, and identity theft. The gang was taking in enormous amounts of cash and would pay off or threaten witnesses and victims not to testify against them. If they didn't comply, they were threatened with even more violence. As a result, traditional investigative and prosecution tactics were useless against this gang. This fortified the determination of Chief Dyer to take down the Dog Pound gang. A team was assembled that brought together what was necessary to accomplish this mission. Expertise in the use of technology in the way of wiretaps to provide irrefutable evidence as proof of who they already knew was committing the crimes. Experience in investigating financial crimes, plus a related network of local, state, and federal contacts. And intelligence, allowing the task force to confidently move forward knowing they were watching the right people and locations. During the early morning hours of April 21st last year, more than 400 law enforcement officers from local, state, and federal agencies converged on dozens of locations in Fresno and Madera counties to execute search and arrest warrants, resulting in 28 arrests and the seizure of cash and vehicles. The Dog Pound gang was essentially crippled and will never regain the violent criminal influence it once held over Fresno. For their dedication, commitment, and skill in eliminating the Dog Pound gang, we proudly award Captain Mark Salazar, Lieutenant David Ramsey, Sergeant Andre Benson, Detective Jose Rivera, Detective Ken Dodd, and Detective Conrado Martin the Fresno Police Department Outstanding Achievement Medal. Will Sergeant Justin Hoagland, Detective Michael Clement, and Detective Sergio Gonzalez please come forward? The Southeast Policing District's Violent Crime Impact Team learned of a large party at the Fresno Fairgrounds promoted by a well-known West Side gang member. Fresno was experiencing a sharp increase in violence involving West Side gang activity, and numerous gang members were expected to be there. After making a quick tactical plan, the team deployed to the fairgrounds. As a large group of suspected gang members left toward the parking lot, a large fight broke out. Officers Clement and Gonzalez responded on foot, but began to receive gunfire. Despite the rounds being fired in their direction, Officer Gonzalez left his cover to assist civilians out of harm's way, and Officer Clement identified the shooters and reported the suspect and fleeing vehicle information over the radio. Sergeant Hoagland was able to get behind the car in a marked vehicle, which fled in excess of 100 miles per hour until losing control and crashing. At gunpoint, the driver exited the vehicle armed with a handgun. Ignoring Sergeant Hoagland's commands, he ran toward a residence where Hoagland immediately disengaged from him when he saw his background may contain children. He saw the suspect discard his gun, coordinated the establishment of a perimeter, and the suspect was taken into custody. The suspect was immediately recognized as one of the most violent individuals within our community, Tremaine Beard. a well-known violent gang member described as a Tier 1 shot caller. Chief Dyer later commented that removing Tremaine Beard from our community will have a tremendous positive impact on the safety of our neighborhoods. Miraculously, no officers were injured. 2 civilians were hit by gunfire but survived. These officers displayed unwavering courage and dedication to their profession while confronted with a rapidly unfolding, chaotic, lethal situation. For their ability to remain calm and make sound decisions during an emergency situation resulting in a top-level gang member being arrested, we award the Fresno Police Department Outstanding Achievement Award to Sergeant Justin Hoagland, Detective Michael Clement, and Detective Sergio Gonzalez.
Kim Sanchez also prosecuted that case. I think Tremaine got just under 10 years in prison and prosecuted all the ones for the Dog Pound gang as well. So give him a round of applause. A little camera shy.
Will Officer Jason Musser please come forward? Officer Musser was handpicked to assist with the construction of the new Central Policing Station at Manchester Center. The department was preparing for a crucial reorganization that was dependent on the Central Station opening on time. Officer Musser coordinated the construction, working side by side with the general contractor on site, while also scheduling and coordinating subcontractors. Due to Officer Musser's success with this project, he was assigned an even greater task of overseeing the construction of the department's new property and evidence warehouse. Once again, he performed well above expectations and was successful. Officer Musser was recently tasked with managing the installation of 2 new report writing facilities in the Northeast and Central districts. Besides possessing the skill set to do exceptional quality work on these projects, Officer Musser receives these assignments because of his tenacity, strong work ethic, and his willingness to embrace the challenge and complete the projects no matter what the timeline. For his successful accomplishments and performance in these construction projects that greatly benefit the department and the citizens of Fresno, we award Officer Jason Musser with the Fresno Police Department Outstanding Achievement Medal.
Some would say it's easier to survive a gun battle than to work through city government and get these projects done, which is probably pretty close.
We will now award the Medal of Merit for meritorious service. The Medal of Merit is awarded to members for exceptional performance in other than a police action, which has greatly benefited the city, department, and/or the law enforcement profession. Will Lieutenant David Newton please come forward? In 2015, when the California Office of Emergency Services approved funding to upgrade computer equipment and workstations in our communications center, Lieutenant Newton rose to the monumental task. The complex engineering and construction work of rewiring, upgrading computer and 911 phone equipment, and the cosmetic and workplace improvements had to be scheduled in parallel processes to ensure timelines were met. Plus, during this entire process, the center had to be kept functioning 24/7 without a loss of efficiency or missing a single call. Lieutenant Newton spent many early mornings and late nights physically moving furniture, building dispatch consoles, and doing his best to minimize the effects of this massive construction and upheaval on his communications personnel as they continually performed their critical work. On May 10th, all systems were cut over to the new systems, bringing them online and connecting our agency to other public safety answering points region-wide. The system worked flawlessly, needing only a few minor adjustments along the way. For his planning and executing this project that took over 14 months, $2.1 million, and personally ensuring that his personnel and the community would benefit from the project, we proudly award Lieutenant Newton with the Medal of Merit for Meritorious Service Medal. We will now award the Fresno Police Department Life Saving Medal. The Life Saving Medal is awarded to members whose immediate actions result in the saving of a human life. Will Officer Jason Jones please come forward? Officer Mark Anderson, Officer Jones's partner in this action, is away on a planned vacation and unable to attend today. On Valentine's Day 2016, at 1 in the morning, Officer Jason Jones and Officer Mark Anderson responded to a woman possibly attempting to jump from the Tuolumne overpass over Highway 99. She was sitting on the ledge outside the guardrail with her legs hanging over, looking at her cell phone. Officers Jones and Anderson attempted to establish a rapport with the woman, but she ignored them for 10 minutes. Assisting officers were diverting traffic into one lane on the freeway below. Suddenly, the woman stood up, threw the phone down, and sidestepped on the ledge above the open lane of traffic. Officers Jones and Anderson immediately rushed and grabbed the woman just before she jumped. They were able to pull her over the guardrail and safely detained her. The woman admitted afterward her intent was to jump in front of the cars below to end her life. For their diligent efforts in communication and their immediate, decisive, life-saving actions that saved the life of this suicidal woman, Officer Jason Jones and Officer Mark Anderson are awarded the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal. Will Sergeant Paul Preston and Officer John Pinedo please come forward? Officer John Pinedo was flagged down regarding an unconscious male who was possibly deceased. As Officer Pinedo assessed the victim, he was able to detect shallow breathing and a very weak pulse. Officer Pinedo began CPR and was quickly joined by Sergeant Preston. Together, they continued CPR for several minutes until emergency medical services arrived to transport the victim to the hospital. The attending ER doctor stated the victim suffered a heart attack, and the officer's early intervention and continued CPR preserved this victim's life. For their rapid intervention and actions to save the life of this man, Sergeant Preston and Officer Pinedo are awarded the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal. Will Sergeant Michael Manfredi and Sergeant Rich Escalante please come forward? Sergeants Manfredi and Escalante both arrived within 4 minutes to a chaotic shooting scene with the 17-year-old victim of a gunshot wound to his head. They had very limited information about the scene, but did a masterful job of quickly securing the scene and making sure the shooter was not still present. Everyone there when the shooting occurred left before they arrived. Sergeants Manfredi and Escalante not only quickly secured the scene, but assessed and began necessary life-saving actions on the victim. He was semi-conscious and vomiting. He was convulsing, and his pulse was becoming very weak. The sergeants moved the victim to the ground on his side to open his airway, and then applied direct pressure to his profusely bleeding head. Collectively, during these actions, they broadcasted the suspect information, preserved evidence, and maintained control of the crime scene, all while the chaos of panicking family members added to the stress they were operating in. The victim was rushed to emergency surgery, and thanks to the life-saving actions of Sergeants Manfredi and Escalante, he survived his injuries. For their rapid and immediate critical analysis and handling of the scene of a violent crime, plus their ability to save the life of a victim of a gunshot wound to the head, Sergeant Manfredi and Sergeant Escalante have earned the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal.
That's Sergeant Manfredi's 12th medal, I think. Is 12? You still got more at home? Maybe when you leave, you can sell those back to us. Take a photo. Come on, Mike. Good job. Thank you.
Will Sergeant Brendan Rames and Officer Daryl Van Deursen please come forward? Sergeant Andy Mercado was part of this life-saving team, but is unable to be here today. Sergeant Andy Mercado, Sergeant Brendan Rames, and Officer Daryl Van Deursen responded Code 3 to a man down on the sidewalk. They found an older man who was not breathing and had no pulse. Sergeant Rames checked for an obstructed airway while Sergeant Mercado began chest compressions. Officer Van Deursen began and continued rescue breathing while Sergeants Rames and Mercado took turns performing the chest compressions for several minutes. Ambulance personnel arrived and transported the victim to the hospital. While en route, they were able to obtain a pulse and breathing. He was stabilized from his diagnosed cardiac arrest at the hospital, and after surgery, made a complete recovery. Hospital personnel credit the officers' immediate and decisive life-saving actions in the survival of this man. For their life-saving actions that enable this victim to survive his heart attack, Sergeant Andy Mercado, Sergeant Brendan Rames, and Officer Daryl Van Deursen are awarded the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal.
And I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege, only because for a couple more months people will listen to me. I've got to say that Sergeant Rames is one of my very best friends on this earth, and for many years I was his partner, and he made sure that I got home safe every night to my family. Chief, and to this community, Sergeant Rames is one of the finest officers that I know, and it's a deep honor for him to be getting this award today. And thank you, my friend, for watching me all these years and making sure that I got home to my wife.
Thank you, Oliver. Appreciate it. And Councilmember Brandow said folks stopped listening to you a long time ago. So you know, way before the 2 months. So, am I right, Steve? All right, give him a round of applause.
Will Sergeant James Rossetti please come forward? Sergeant James Rossetti was the first to arrive on a call involving an attempted suicide by hanging. The family had found the 35-year-old victim had cut him down before Sergeant Rossetti's arrival and were panicked and distraught. Sergeant Rossetti determined the victim had no pulse and was not breathing. He immediately began CPR, which was made even more heroic by the fact that he had no personal protective gear with him. He was so intent on saving this victim's life that even after assisting officers arrived, he personally continued providing CPR. Emergency medical services arrived and continued life-saving efforts on the way to the hospital, where doctors were able to revive him. Because of Sergeant Rossetti's heroic and immediate actions, he is proudly presented with the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal.
Somebody give me a lift here.
Will Officer Keith Kobashi and Officer Jesus Salinas please come forward? Officers Kobashi and Salinas responded to a call of a woman who had possibly overdosed in a hotel room. Upon arrival, they found the victim unconscious and could not wake her. Officer Kobashi checked for vital signs and confirmed she had no pulse and was not breathing. Officers Kobashi and Salinas started two-person CPR. After approximately 2 minutes of performing CPR, the victim was revived and took a breath. When ambulance personnel arrived, they transported the victim to the hospital, where she was listed in stable condition. The treating doctor stated without the actions of the officers, the victim would have lost her life. For their life-saving actions that saved the life of a fellow human being, we are pleased to award the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal to Officer Keith Kobashi and Officer Jesus Salinas. Will Officer Nicholas Romero please come forward? Officer Romero was off duty and driving in the vicinity of Palm and 8th Street when he noticed a large cloud of smoke growing to his east. He knew the smoke was an indication of a growing fire, so he immediately headed to the location. When he arrived, 2 witnesses told him they believe someone was trapped inside. Officer Romero heroically placed himself in danger to search for an entry point into the burning building. As the fire continued to grow, he found a small portion of the building that was not engulfed in flames. A boarded-up window separated him from the victim. With the assistance of 2 witnesses, Officer Romero pried open the window and was met by the male victim inside. He grabbed his arms, pulled him out of the building, and escorted him to a safe location. The fire department arrived shortly thereafter to fight the fire. For his immediate actions to save the life of this stranger trapped inside a burning building, we are proud to award the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal to Officer Nicholas Romero. Will Officer Cha Tao please come forward? Corporal Patricia Sellers Anderson, Officer Tao's partner in this action, is away on a planned vacation and unable to attend today. Corporal Sellers Anderson and Officer Tao responded to a Blackstone Avenue motel regarding a subject who had just shot himself in the head. The subject's girlfriend called dispatch from Stockton, where she witnessed him shoot himself on video over the phone. Upon arrival, security informed the officers that a gunshot was heard and confirmed the suspect's room number. Officers could hear gurgling in the room and forced entry inside. The subject was on his back in a pool of blood with a gunshot wound to the side of his head, and the gun was next to him. He was unresponsive and not breathing, but had a faint pulse. Corporal Sellers Anderson and Officer Tao went right to work, positioning his body and performing rescue breaths. The victim's pulse became stronger, and he began breathing on his own. Emergency medical services arrived and rushed the victim to the hospital. His trauma team doctor stated without the immediate entry into the room and the emergency rescue breathing, the subject surely would have succumbed to his injury. For their immediate and decisive actions that saved the life of this man, we are pleased to award the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal to Corporal Patricia Sellers Anderson and Officer Cha Tao. Will Officer Julie Scammell, Officer Manuel Amaya, and Officer Cao Soy Sei Chow please come forward? Officers Scammell, Amaya, and Sei Chow were dispatched to check the welfare of a non-responsive woman. The officers arrived and were met by hysterical family members who indicated their grandmother was non-responsive in the bedroom. Officers found she was not breathing and no pulse could be detected. Officer Scammell immediately repositioned the victim on the floor, and all 3 officers began CPR. Family members advised the officers their grandmother had a pacemaker, multiple medical issues, and had not felt well that day. Officers Scammell, Amaya, and Sei Chow continued CPR even after ambulance arrived, and Officer Amaya continued CPR in the back of the ambulance throughout the ride to the hospital. Hospital staff worked relentlessly on the grandmother and were able to get her into stable condition. Medical personnel advised this grandmother was still alive because of the immediate and sustained life-saving actions of the three officers. For their immediate and steadfast efforts to save the life of this family's beloved grandmother, we are proud to present the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal to Officer Julie Scammell, Officer Manuel Amaya, and Officer Cao Soy Sei Chow. Will Officer Nicholas Palomino, Officer Martin Padilla, and Officer Paul Hill please come forward? Officer David Farfan is recovering from a work-related injury and is not able to attend today's ceremony. Officers Palomino, Padilla, Hill, and Farfan all arrived within minutes of each other to a call of a stabbing victim. Upon arrival, the officers found a 17-year-old boy lying face down in a pool of blood on the Edison High School campus. He was unresponsive, not breathing, and did not have a pulse. He was severely bleeding from 2 stab wounds to the left side of his chest. Officers Palomino, Padilla, Hill, and Farfan immediately went to work as a life-saving team. They performed and rotated chest compressions, rescue breathing, and direct pressure on the wounds. They were able to regain a pulse, establish an airway, and got the victim breathing on his own. After several hours of surgery at the hospital, the victim survived. Fresno Fire, American Ambulance, and the staff at Community Regional Medical Center all concurred that if not for the actions of these 4 officers, this young man would not be alive today. For their immediate, decisive, and well-performed actions to save the life of this victim of violence, we proudly present the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal to Officer Nicholas Palomino, Officer Martin Padilla, Officer Paul Hill, and Officer David Farfan. Will Sergeant Adrian Alvarez please come forward? Sergeant Alvarez was off duty attending his church when the event speaker presenting the sermon began to feel dizzy. He lost consciousness and fell to the ground, striking his head on the podium behind him. He was making gasping sounds when Sergeant Alvarez and another church member, Tom Booth, a retired nurse, rushed to the victim to render aid. Sergeant Alvarez made a quick assessment and rolled the victim onto his side. The victim stopped breathing and lost his pulse. Sergeant Alvarez immediately began chest compressions, and Mr. Booth began mouth-to-mouth rescue breathing. They continued rotating responsibilities for at least 5 minutes until emergency medical services arrived and took over. Prior to being placed in the ambulance, the victim regained his pulse and was breathing. He was transported to the hospital where he made a full recovery. The attending physician stated, without the accurate life-saving actions of Sergeant Alvarez and Mr. Booth, the victim would have passed away due to the lack of oxygen to his brain. For his quick and knowledgeable performance of life-saving actions and CPR, we are pleased to award the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal to Sergeant Adrian Alvarez.
We have someone here very special. Would you like to come forward? This. Why don't both of you please come forward? I'd like you to take a photo with them. No? Well, he can come forward. You glad to be with us today? Amen.
God gave him the power to trust him.
Amen. Amen. Round of applause, please. Good to see. It's always good to see the survivors here.
Will Officer Michael Diaz please come forward? Officer Diaz, along with retired Officer Darrell Nichols, arrived on a call regarding a possible suicide attempt. The 19-year-old victim was threatening suicide to her mother by hanging herself. Officers located the victim in the bathroom. She had secured a belt around her neck and was hanging from the towel bar on the back of the door. The victim's face was pale and swollen. Her eyes were bulging and closed. She was unresponsive and not breathing. Both Officers Diaz and Nichols lifted her to relieve the tension on her neck, cut the belt, and removed it. As they checked her for signs of life, she took a shallow breath and displayed some minor eye movement. They moved her into the living room where both officers repeatedly told her to stay with us. Officer Diaz began sternum rubs in hopes of preventing her from losing consciousness again. She began to cough and displayed body tremors as if she was having a seizure. American Ambulance arrived and took her to the hospital for treatment, where she made a complete recovery. The attending physician stated that without the officer's immediate actions, the victim would surely be deceased. For the rapid and quick-thinking actions that saved the life of this young woman, we are proud to present the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal to Officer Michael Diaz.
We are almost done, I promise you. There's too many heroes to be recognized here. I can see that. Go ahead, Ignacio.
Will Officer William Colley please come forward? Officer Colley was dispatched to check the welfare of an 83-year-old man who was having difficulty breathing. Having prior experience as an emergency medical technician, Officer Colley knew that time was of the essence, so he activated his emergency lights and siren to expedite his arrival to the home. When he arrived, he quickly assessed the victim, who had no pulse and was not breathing. By administering CPR for several minutes, Officer Colley was able to revive the victim by the time paramedics and fire personnel arrived. The man, who now had a pulse and was breathing, was transported to the hospital. The pulmonary specialist from the intensive care unit confirmed that Officer Colley's swift assessment and decision to administer CPR were definitely instrumental in saving this man's life. For his quick recognition of the gravity of this situation and expert life-saving rescue skills, it is with pride that we award Officer William Colley with the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal. Will Corporal Scott Reese, Corporal Stephen Jacobson, and Officer Gilbert Quesada please come forward? Corporals Reese and Jacobson and Officer Quesada were just 1 block away when a call came into dispatch regarding a man not breathing. The three arrived to find a family member starting CPR on the subject who was lying on the porch. Corporal Reese checked the man for a pulse but did not locate one. He immediately started chest compressions, and Officer Quesada began to perform rescue breathing. The three repositioned the victim on the porch for more room to perform CPR. Corporal Jacobson then took over chest compressions, while Officer Quesada continued rescue breathing until paramedics arrived. The paramedics supervisor credits Corporals Reese and Jacobson and Officer Quesada with his regaining his vital signs and surviving the incident. And the attending physician credits their CPR as the reason this man is doing so well. For their rapid and decisive actions that saved the life of this man, we are pleased to present the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal to Corporal Scott Reese, Corporal Stephen Jacobson, and Officer Gilbert Quesada. We will now award the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medal with Valor. The Life-Saving with Valor Medal is awarded to members who distinguish themselves by an act of bravery or heroism above and beyond the normal demand of duty, which resulted or could have resulted in the saving of human life in a situation where the absence of such action would result in the loss of life. Will Lieutenant Joey Alvarez, Officer Vince Bontian, Officer Bernie Vizcarra, and Officer Daryl Van Dursen please come forward? Corporal Sellers Anderson will also receive this award, but was unable to be here today. Lieutenant Alvarez, Officers Bontian, Vizcarra, Van Dursen, and Sellers Anderson were dispatched after several calls were received about a disturbance in an apartment near Roding Park. Upon arrival, officers found a highly agitated suspect armed with a knife. They also discovered a female victim who had been stabbed multiple times and was still inside the apartment with the suspect. Numerous attempts to get the suspect to surrender and comply were made, but the suspect refused to cooperate. It was later learned the suspect told the victim that his intent was to kill her. Officers attempted to break a window to address the suspect and take him into custody, but when they did, he began to further attack the victim. Officers then forced entry into the room to stop him from stabbing the victim, which also placed them in danger of injury by the suspect. The suspect still refused to surrender, and he more violently attacked the victim. After the officers were able to stop the life-threatening attack, they began to perform life-saving activities on the victim and the suspect as well. The victim underwent emergency surgery for her 13 stab wounds. These officers not only stopped the violent and deadly attack, but valiantly risked serious injury to save the life of another. Without their actions, the victim would have been killed or succumbed to the injuries she had already received prior to their arrival. For their courageous and selfless actions to save the life of this victim, it is with pride that we present the Fresno Police Department Life Saving with Valor Medal to Lieutenant Joey Alvarez, Corporal Sellers Anderson, Officer Vince Bontian, Officer Bernie Vizcarra, and Officer Daryl Van Deersen.
Deputy Chief Farmer and I were out at the scene, I believe, that night after this incident occurred, and unfortunately they had to force entry and took that man's life, but it was while he was in the midst of stabbing her. And I remember the day after getting a call from the victim's daughter in tears. So grateful, so thankful for the heroic acts of those officers. So what they did was incredible timing, but incredible bravery.
Now we will award the Fresno Police Department Medal of Valor. This medal is the highest commendation awarded by the department and may be awarded to members who display extreme courage while consciously facing mortal danger during a police action in an effort to provide protection or preservation of life. Will Sergeant Rudy Tafoya, Sergeant Brian Pierce, Detective Jason Serrano, Detective Josh Sharp, Officer Gunter Mice, and Detective Robert Escabel please come forward? On Wednesday, October 19th, 2016, at 8 in the morning, a 911 call was received regarding a child who told his aunt that his father had shot his pregnant mother in the back sometime during the night. Officers arrived and established a perimeter around the home. Crisis negotiators attempted to contact the suspect via a cell phone and used a PA system. After 35 minutes, a shot was heard from inside the house, and minutes later, contact was made. SWAT was deployed, and an entry plan was devised to enter the home to save the mortally wounded mother and unborn child. The suspect was tracking officers at hearing their movement, shot in that direction, demonstrating his intent and ability to kill the officers. The SWAT reactionary team made a tactical entry into the room from where the suspect was barricaded and was shooting through the walls where he believed the officers were. The suspect was taken into custody, and the victim and her unborn child were rescued. The next day, a healthy yet early child was delivered while the mother fought for her life. Many officers may have the opportunity to save a life, but few will face saving a life by entering a room occupied by an armed suspect who is actively shooting and has already displayed his intent and ability to kill, with the officers knowing they would most definitely receive gunfire and possibly be wounded. For their courageous actions in risking their lives and sacrificing their own safety in order to save a victim and her unborn child, we are proud to award the Medal of Valor to Sergeant Rudy Tafoya, Sergeant Brian Pierce, Detective Jason Serrano, Detective Josh Sharp, Officer Gunter Mice, and Detective Robert Esquivel. Will Officer Robert Valdez, Officer Damon Edrozo, Officer Christopher Tarpley, Detective Robert Yeager, Officer Ruben Barron, and Officer Felipe Uribe please come forward? Sergeant Lenny Lujan is unable to be here to receive his award as he is on deployment with the California Air National Guard. On Saturday, September 3rd, 2016, at 8:40 a.m., a call was broadcasted of an active shooter with 2 correctional officers down in the Fresno County Jail lobby. Officers arrived on scene and immediately developed a rescue plan with sheriff's deputies. Due to the tinted windows of the lobby, the officers could not see what was happening inside. They entered, and once inside, everyone had to assess and act very quickly. Officer Yeager provided lethal cover with the shotgun so officers could evacuate the citizens and rescue the 2 correctional officers who had been shot. Officers Edrozo and Barron pulled Correctional Officer Scanlon to safety, and Officer Barron stayed with Scanlon, continuously clearing blood and tissue from his wound so he could breathe until he was loaded in the ambulance and transported to the hospital. Officers Uribe and Tarpley pulled Correctional Officer Davila to safety, and Officer Uribe stayed with Davila, applying pressure to her wound until she was loaded into the ambulance. Once the 2 correctional officers were removed to safety, the officers and deputies took the suspect into custody. This suspect was highly motivated to injure law enforcement officers and had placed the lives of citizen bystanders in the jail lobby in jeopardy. Without hesitation, all personnel involved on this call courageously and willingly put themselves in mortal danger to face an active shooter and to rescue and save the lives of the injured officers. For these officers' swift and courageous actions, without regard for their own safety, which brought this incident to a quick resolution by rescuing the officers and taking the suspect into custody, we proudly award Sergeant Lenny Lujan, Officer Robert Valdez, Officer Damon Edrozo, Officer Christopher Tarpley, Detective Robert Yeager, Officer Ruben Barron, and Felipe Uribe, the Fresno Police Department Medal of Valor.
Thank you. Thank you, Ignacio. I appreciate that. We're going to have each of the officers come out on stage at this time, and we'll have an opportunity to give them one more round of applause. I think what we saw today is something that will forever be embedded in my mind. You know, what the officers see on a daily basis and what they experience is something that no one should ever experience. They are thrust into situations not knowing what they're getting themselves into and not knowing whether or not they're going to be able to leave that situation alive. They are in the right place at the right time, and they do the right thing. And so I am so very, very proud of each and every one of these employees and officers that stand before you today. Short guys in front. Got that? You know, as a police chief, I have a lot of goals. A goal to suppress crime and reduce traffic collisions, to get to emergency calls or service on time, and a lot of other goals. And we should have goals. But all of those goals that I have pale in comparison to the number one goal. And that number one goal is to never lose a police officer under my watch. We've been very fortunate. I've been at the hospital many times. I was at the hospital this morning holding the hand of one of my officers and praying with him after a telephone or a electrical pole collapsed while he was out at a traffic collision, striking him on the back, pinning him to the ground. Fortunately, Officer Bishop is going to survive that injury, but he'll be in the hospital a few days. He's got a broken pelvis, and I'd ask that each and every one of you pray for him. That happens each and every day in our city. Police officers that put their life on the line so that other people can sleep at night. Again, I want to say thank you to the families. It's my promise to you that we will do everything in our power to keep your loved ones safe as they keep this community safe. We provide them with the very best training, state-of-the-art equipment. We ensure that the staffing levels are appropriate so that when they pick up the radio and call for assistance, they have a fellow officer to come and help them. And what I share with the officers is that that is our responsibility, the things that we do for them. What I expect from them, although they take risk, to not take unnecessary risk, because it does no good for us to lose an officer and not be able to help the people we're trying to save. And so at this time, I would like for all of you to please stand and give one last round of applause to these heroes.